Thank you so much.
Okay, so welcome all to this workshop on getting started with online course development. This is the first of 4 workshops, and I will just tell you up ahead of time that this is a little bit of an experiment. So as we go through, I may mention some things that are going to change or that may come up. With that said, I do hope that you'll all find this useful. Also, I am not one to stand on ceremony, so if you have a question, please raise your hand or even just speak up, and I will do my best to answer your question. Worst comes to worst, I will simply tell you that we'll have to address that particular question later. So with that, you may have noticed if you looked at the descriptions for these courses, these are all named after sort of parts of vacations. So throughout this course, we'll be using a process called backwards design. And a fun analogy for that is getting prepared for a trip. So for our day 1 theme, we will begin planning by picking our destination and then figuring out the best process to reach our final destination. Now, the reason we're looking at this model is that this is the model that the instructional design team at Oswego uses as the basis for our course development process. So this session will walk you through what backwards design is and how it shapes the creation of a course. During this particular session, we will also introduce you to the Oswego course syllabus that we use. One thing I do want to note is that this is a theory-heavy series. Well, we will be talking about specific tools and even specific examples. A lot of this will just be about the theory of constructing a course online. So again, me talking for 40 minutes may not be the most entertaining thing, so please interrupt with questions. So first, I just want to give a quick overview of what we'll be doing. So today, as noted, we'll be learning about backwards design and looking at objectives. Tomorrow, we're going to plan for what souvenirs we want to bring home, which in this case, we'll be learning about something called artifacts and thinking about the assessments we want to use in our course. The third session, which we'll have a week break between, is becoming a tour guide. So refining our instructional practices and looking at various media. Anybody who has ever been part of a large tour group, or gosh forbid, actually tried to lead one, knows that keeping everybody interested and keeping everybody on the same page can be quite the challenge. So here we'll be looking at strategies on how to do that with your teaching materials. Then finally, on day 4, we will hopefully have our trip fully planned. And so that is when we will actually look at running our course in Brightspace. So that day will be a bit more on the technical nitty-gritty of using these tools. So having said that, let me introduce you to your collaborators. I, of course, am Douglas Hemphill. I am one of the campus instructional designers. Online with me today is Theresa Gilliard-Cook, who is our Assistant Director of Instructional Design. I got that right? She's probably muted. Unfortunately, Carrie Mocyk could not be here today, but she is our other campus instructional designer. And we also regularly work with Kathy Dutton from CTS. Damn it. So now I'm going to do one of those cardinal sins of presentations and actually read off of the slide, but this is our in-house definition of what instructional designers do on Oswego, at Oswego, and we've spent a lot of time on this, and I think it's really important to know. So what we are here to do is to collaborate with faculty to optimize their teaching, and stuff is in the way, I apologize. Their teaching expertise using instructional strategies, best practices, and pertinent technologies. The approaches we use are derived from research based in the science of learning and have underpinnings based in cognitive psychology, information processing, and educational psychology. So one thing you will note in here is nowhere does it say that we are the content matter experts, unless of course you happen to be teaching a course on instructional design. So jumping back one slide, we are your collaborators. We are here not to tell you what to do, but to work with you to get the best end product we can. Now, one thing that we've done for this course is we've set up a companion course in Brightspace. And again, because of some of our personnel issues, you are not yet enrolled in this, but you will be able to access this very soon simply by looking on your main homepage, your institution page on Brightspace, finding the No Term tab, and going into the course labeled Online Course Development Training. Now, again, as with this course in general, this is a bit of a prototype, so just be aware that we may change and add content as time goes on. We're also trying some various aspects of different design ideas with this. Now, I did see a hand go up.
Yeah, it was Ben.
What can I do for you?
Yeah, Doug, I just want to find out if I'm in the process of developing a new course. If I use this course shell, no term, is it possible to export it at the time I have a course actually in the course shell?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you can, again, we've just provided that as a tool to go along with the companion course and these series of presentations. So Ben, yeah, you can use it however you see fit.
Yeah, because I want to start using it to prepare for the course I'm developing. But when I finish, would I be able to export it or use it in actual? Okay.
Yes. Yes. Okay. And that goes for anybody. I mean, if you're doing a course, if you're looking to develop a course, you would just go through the help desk to request a course shell for, for something going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just send an email to help@oswego.edu and we'll take it from there. This course, the companion course, you'll be enrolled in as students, but we will be creating you just a general sandbox to go along with this workshop that you'll be able to use for whatever you want. And again, hopefully that will be up by the time we have our course tomorrow. Yay, clickers. Heck, there we go. So this course specifically is about offering or developing and offering asynchronous online courses. So I thought it was a good idea just to go through what are the characteristics of an online course. Well, the first thing to understand is that online is just a modality. So when we talk about best teaching practices and the tools that we use and whatnot, a lot of these are beneficial regardless of how you're teaching. So if you have something that you do in your face-to-face class that you absolutely love, chances are we can move it into an online modality. And by the same token, if you think that you're doing something, or as you look and listen at this presentation, and you think something's a really great idea, there's no reason that you can't adapt that to a face-to-face or a synchronous online class, even though you learned about it in a course about asynchronous online. Now, for our purposes, when we say a course is online, it is online. That means all interactions must be done online. Now, this does not mean that if you have a student that is on campus and they want to drop into your face-to-face office hours that you have to go, oh, nope, you can't do that. You have to do Zoom office hours. But it does mean that anything that you require or even give the option of a student doing in a course, they have to be able to do that in an online modality or have the option to do that in an online modality. Next thing, unsurprisingly, an asynchronous online course is asynchronous. So what this means is a student cannot be required to be online at a specific time. And this one can get a little bit tricky because there are certainly situations where you're like, well, what if I offer multiple times? What if I do this? What if I do that? That's a case where you really want to sit down and talk with an instructional designer so that we can figure out what an appropriate solution is. But generally speaking, even if it's online, you cannot say something like, well, I'm going to have a mandatory review session at 5 p.m. on Friday night, and it's okay because it's online. Nope, that's not okay. Now, on the flip side, this one is more for students, but an online course is not self-paced. So how a student gets their work done is up to them. We don't really care if they do their work at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday or 9 a.m. on a Thursday. What we care about is that it is done by the due date. So if it is due on Friday at 5, that is when it is due. It is not due whenever they feel like it. Finally, under normal circumstances, a course cannot change the modality during a semester. So you can't have in the catalog, you cannot have a face-to-face course and at the last moment decide you're going to make it hybrid or fully online. The cases where this is really different is short term. If the university closes for a weather emergency or a snow day, there may be a directive from above that we're doing things remotely. Sort of midterm, if you injure yourself, get a broken leg, whatever, and you want to teach online for a full week or for a few weeks, and long-term emergency, we obviously had that with COVID. But the thing is all of these changes of modality are done basically with permission, even in the case of, well, I feel like I can't teach because I broke my leg. You're still going to talk to your supervisor or your chair and start a chain of permission for that. This is not something where you say, I'm not feeling well today. I've got a stomach bug. So for today, we're going to do things online. So I do also want to spend just a couple minutes on the challenges of teaching an online course. And I think it's worth noting that a lot of these challenges are the same ones that are faced by our students, albeit for them, it's through a different lens. but there can be benefits to having conversations with the class about your mutual struggles in an online format. Now, the first most common one we run into is time management. Running an online class is not the same as running a face-to-face class. Now, a common question that we get is, does running a online course take more time than a face-to-face class? And you'll get some different answers on that, but I would say yes and no. Online courses are very front-loaded because you do not want to be teaching an online course while winging it, the way that you can kind of do in a face-to-face class. If you've been teaching something for 20 years and you forget your notes, it's not a big deal for you to walk into class and just talk about what you know. That approach does not work online. And certain activities can feel like they take more work. Discussions are a particular example because you can't just gab with your students and sort of keep track of who's saying what and mark it down on a sheet of paper. You actually have to read everybody's discussion and think about the grade that they deserve. In some cases, you'll actually participate in those discussions, though the latter is really up to you. But that's obviously a time sink that you wouldn't have in a regular face-to-face course. But the flip side is that once the course is built, it is built. You might need to do a little bit of tweaking here and there, but I think in a lot of cases, once it is up and running and you're happy with it, there's actually less work in maintaining it because all of the material is already there. So my feeling is that it's a lot more work up front, but that it is a bit of a wash in the end, but your mileage may vary. And I'm sorry, I'm just... Okay, so Teresa's also sort of running a back channel here, so feel free to participate in that. Back channels are wonderful things. And well, we won't get into it in this course. Back channels, and if you are able to make good use of back channels, can be an excellent way of driving discussion during a lecture, though there's that balance of what's going on in the back channel versus what you want them to pay attention to you saying. Now, the next thing is clarity of communication. And this really comes down to the fact that everything, or the vast majority of your communications, are going to be in text, or at the very least are not going to be interactive. So the best thing I can tell you here is to really carefully review your materials for the clarity of your language and make sure that you're getting your points across. And also look for ways to reduce the barriers for students to talk to you. There's this line of thought that, oh, at the end of the class, any student that wants to ask me questions can just wander up and ask me. Again, there's a little bit of truth and a little bit of myth to that, because there are students that will not feel comfortable approaching you as the faculty member. So you may not be getting as many questions from people with questions as you think. But obviously, that's a much easier and immediate process to say, I don't know something, I'm going to walk up to the faculty member. Then, oh, I have to open up an email, think about what I want to say, make sure I'm using proper grammar, whatever, and write it off. So just think, and we'll get into this more in detail later, but just think about what are ways that you can reduce the barriers to students being able to communicate with you. And then last, we have building community. I think this is maybe the biggest challenge in teaching online because we repeatedly hear both students and faculty feel isolated, that they do not feel that they are part of the class community. And some people actually thrive in either environment. Some people are pure introverts and they love just doing their work and not being bothered. But other people really feed off the energy of having a class in front of them or being part of that class. So for now, again, I'm just going to say, sort of keep in the back of your mind, what are additional options for community building? And again, Teresa's dropping some very good information, so I'd encourage you to keep track of what she's saying too. And I apologize as my one computer keeps deciding to lock itself. So now we're finally going to start diving into backwards design. So a guy by the name of Grant Wiggins and another fellow by the name of Jay McTighe laid out the framework for backwards design in their book, Understanding by Design. And the argument that they make is that when teachers are designing lessons, units, courses, etc., they often focus on the activities and instruction rather than the outputs of that instruction. And that approach is what we would consider forward design. In contrast, backwards design is focused primarily on the final student learnings and understandings. So basically, we're flipping traditional thinking on its head, and instead of starting by saying, okay, this textbook looks great for teaching Physics 101, physics, and instead we're starting with saying, what do I want my students to get out of attending my Physics 101 course? And the clicker's broke again. This clicker does not like me. So to sum it up, again, from Understanding by Design, our lessons, units, and courses should be logically inferred from the results sought, not derived from the methods, books, and activities with which we are most comfortable. Curriculum should lay out the most effective ways of achieving specific results. In short, the best designs derive backwards from the learning sought. So with that, sorry, let me back up one sec. We can see over here on the right that we have our sort of model. And our first stopping point with backwards design is learning outcomes. So let's talk about learning outcomes. So what is the purpose of a learning outcome? Now, this language comes right from the Oswego Syllabus Template that we use. So most obviously, we want to inform students of what they need to know or what they need to accomplish. And part of this is, in order to accomplish that stuff, what do students need to have in terms of knowledge, skills, or in some cases, attitudes by the end of the course? Now, we're also going to tread a little bit into what makes a good course objective, because this is something that the IDs love to pound on. Course objectives should be measurable in some capacity. And this means that we really want to avoid verbs like think, know, and the one that we truly hate is understand, because it's exceptionally hard to measure those action verbs. And so just in general, what you want to think of is what behaviors are students going to be graded on? Now, as we start thinking about developing outcomes for a course, one way to do that is to think about prioritizing what's important. And this particular bit of information comes from Vanderbilt University. And so we can think of this, okay, I'm going to start with my very general subject. And then I'm just going to think within that subject, what do I want my participants exposed to on a relatively high level? So this is the knowledge considered worth being familiar with. It's information that fits within the questions that are really the lowest priority within the unit or the course. From there, we jump to level 2, which is what knowledge and skills should participants master? Well, this is obviously the knowledge that fits in the idea of what facts, what concepts, what principles, and what processes, and maybe what strategies and methods students should really be familiar with when they leave the course. So for example, in one case, I might be familiar with what Bernoulli's principle is. In another case, I might be able to at least recognize the equations for orbital dynamics. But then level 3 is really what are the big ideas and important comprehensions that participants should retain. So this is not, hey, I knew this for the test. I got through the test. That's great. I can forget I ever knew this stuff. This is what do you as the faculty member want them to take with them? And the answer to number 3 can really give you a great starting point for can really give you something to adapt into concrete specific learning goals for your students. And in doing so, it identifies the desired results that you want from your students. So one thing that I'm going to ask you to do after this class is done, and you will have access to this sheet in the companion course, is to think about for the course that you want to design, what are your learning objectives? And then the next thing I'm going to say is optional. If you want to rank them by importance, it can be interesting, but it's not necessary. It may be that all of your learning objectives have an equal level of importance. Or alternatively, you can put in everything that you want your students to experience in this course and mark them by their importance, but not show the low-level important ones to students. Just kind of keep them in your back pocket as stuff that you want students to use and that you can reference as you work on the course. And now, as we go through the rest of this training workshop, we'll see more and more columns added to this. So now this may seem very late in the course, but we're now going to talk about what are the outcomes for this particular workshop. And this was a little bit fun because I actually had a discussion with people that, again, normally the objectives and the outcomes are the very first thing that I would put up in any course so students know exactly what is coming. But in this case, I thought it might be helpful to put the outcomes after we've had the chance to talk about the outcomes so that you have your own chance to think about what do these outcomes really encompass? Are they good outcomes? Do they follow the rules that I laid down? And it just gives you a chance to reflect on them. And of course, so far we've hit describing backwards design, and we're in the process of creating measurable course outcomes. So now that we've talked about course outcomes, I do want to familiarize you with the syllabus, because this is really the document that kind of pulls together some of the stuff that we've been talking about. And it's also where I would start with my backwards design. As we looked at the different sections available in the syllabus, you'll see different areas that you can fill in and sort of work backwards. So the first thing that you can look at, well, actually, let me start with this. What is the purpose of a syllabus? Now, the definition I'm going to give you actually comes from Stanford University, and I find it interesting because it is a statement that is focused towards students. It is telling students, here is what a syllabus should provide you. And what it says is a syllabus is your guide to a course and what will be expected of you over the course of the quarter. Generally, it will include course policies, rules and regulations, required texts, and a schedule of assignments. A syllabus can tell you nearly everything you need to know about how a course will be run and what will be expected of you. And I actually think that's a pretty good definition of what a syllabus should do, with one little caveat. What I would add to that is that a syllabus should also tell students what they can expect from you as the instructor. So we are not going to walk through the entire syllabus document. It is lengthy. But instead, I wanted to sort of break it up into a few sections. So first are what I would consider the introductory sections. And these can almost be approached at any time. So the first is simply a welcome, or what I like to think of is, hi, I'm your professor. Nice to meet you, kind of like what you would do in the first day in class. We'll touch on this a little bit more in a different session, but one thing that works really well in this case is video introductions, and we do offer support for that on campus. Again, just send an email to help@oswego.edu. Say, hey, I'd like to do an introductory video for my course, and we will work on arranging that. The second is the instructor's role. And this gets into the last thing that I said about really both what students can expect from you as the instructor, but also how you want them to view you as the instructor. The old adage for the lecture hall when it was face-to-face was the idea of the sage on the stage. I have been in some of the old lecture halls in England where it was literally stadium seating, all facing down on one faculty member who would preach to his students about whatever his subject matter was for however long his class period was, and that was that. He was the one with the knowledge, and everything was based on the transfer of that knowledge. Now, especially as we move towards an online model, you're no longer the one providing that information in a first-hand method. There's certainly ways for you to provide bits and pieces via mini lectures and videos, but we see more reliance on secondary information and more participation from the faculty member in the various activities in the course. So now you start moving into what we would refer to as the guide on the side. And again, we'll touch on some of these concepts more as we go through the rest of the workshop. Really wish I hadn't set that power. And then also in the introductory sections is contact information, which may seem very basic, but it usually includes your expectations for contact. And that can really affect how your faculty, or sorry, how your student-faculty dynamic develops. You know, are they allowed to send you instant messages? Are they allowed to call you? Are there specific hours that they want to call you? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But probably the biggest one is building an expectation for your response time. Are you always online? If a student drops you a message at 2 a.m., are they going to get a reply at 2:15? Or is it something where I'll get back to you in 24 hours, or maybe it's 24 hours during the regular week and 72 hours over the weekend? And you start seeing this as really something that you want to think about because you want to build student expectations so that students aren't disappointed. By default, student expectations tend to be, I sent an email, he hasn't responded yet. And we look at the time the email was sent and it was 30 minutes ago. So that would be poor setting of expectations and poor understanding of expectations for the student. So again, something to think about. And I would also include in this your grading timelines, because grading is a way that you communicate with your students. And students should really have an idea of, if I turn something in, am I going to get the feedback back in term for the next assignment? How long am I going to have to look at that feedback? So there's a lot more buried in here than you might initially think just from thinking, oh, contact information and communication expectations. The next section I like to call, am I in the right place? This is basically your course summary and those course objectives that we just talked about. Now, the course summary, that's simply a high-level explanation of what you expect to be covering in the course. But the objectives really are what's telling the students, here's what you are going to have to do. And between those two, that should tell a student, yes, I'm in the right class, and yes, I can probably do it. As a quick aside, the course summary is also something that we can set up to be a video introduction. So instead of just the paragraph that you might get from the course catalog, you can actually spend a couple minutes explaining what the subject matter is about and also showing some of your passion for the subject matter, because hopefully we all enjoy what we do. Oops. Required materials, almost always, this is just going to be the text. The only thing that I really want to highlight here is that you need to let the students know upfront about any expenses that they will incur in the course. So pretty much the worst thing you can do to a student is halfway through say, oh, by the way, it's going to be $30 to do this particular activity. There's a couple different tools that you can use in a class that add expenses and whatnot, and you just have to make sure you know all of those upfront, and that you are being very clear about what the student needs to succeed in the course and what that is going to cost them. Now, of course, the next most important thing for students is, well, what do I need to do? And here we see two more phases of that backwards design. One is the learning activities and how you will be evaluated. This both tells students, here's what you're going to have to do, and gives them that initial framework of here's what you have to do to get an A or a B, or generally, here's what my expectations for exemplary work are. And the other part of that is oftentimes within learning activities is reading textbooks, reading lectures, otherwise getting familiar with the material. So in this context, that term learning activities is an overarching concept that covers both the delivery of information and the assessment of students. This is also within the course where we would put rubrics that are used across the course. So like if you have a standard rubric just for discussions, you might post it here. And maybe last but not least is the idea of the course calendar. Now, Brightspace does offer due dates, so technically Brightspace can build your calendar for you, but based on a lot of student feedback, they really appreciate having that simple spreadsheet that they can print out that tells them everything they need to do for the entire semester, and the due dates just act as backups. Oops. Keep hitting wrong buttons. And then there's some boilerplate text that you will see in the version that we include. I don't want to spend any time on that. One thing I do want to point out really quickly is I love this comic. Basically, it's the in the syllabus comic. Everything is in the syllabus. But I do want you to take a step back just for a moment and think about, how is the student feeling here? In every case, they are being given a one-line answer that it's in the syllabus. Well, maybe it wasn't clear in the syllabus, or maybe they just had trouble understanding the syllabus. So just think about, how could this interaction look different, and what sort of communication and rapport could you build with your students if your default answer wasn't simply, it's in the syllabus? So with that said, I would still start with saying it's in the syllabus to the whole class, but then if I have individuals come up and ask me, I will make an attempt to talk to them, or at least that's my recommendation. So that really wraps up our material for the first day. Again, as soon as you get access to the companion course, you'll see some optional assignments there. I would encourage you to locate or create some course objectives for your course. They don't have to be perfect. And of course, if you have an official course outline for your course, there will be objectives in there. To my understanding, those are not 100% written in stone. So you do have a little bit of play there as long as you are still touching on the same concepts. And I would like you to begin filling out that course development worksheet that I showed. And then I'm going to give you two optional assignments. Again, I know it's 24 hours, so this is not a lot of turnaround. But if you feel like it, you do have the option to post your course development worksheet in a discussion board. And if you want to play with a Dropbox, you can post your syllabus into a assignment Dropbox that is located in the course. And this would just give you an opportunity to see what students see as they walk through these things. Now, since I am a good little academic, I do have my list of all sources, including all pictures and the various academic and informational sources I used for this. And I will ask if there are any questions in the few minutes that we have left.
Yeah, Doug, I apologize for being dense, but where can we find that companion course?
So again, nobody is enrolled in the companion course yet, but they should be by the end of the day. And then you should see it in your full course list under the no tab term, or you can use the waffle and just search. Come on. And just search online course development training. And I will send an email to everybody who attended the class to let them know when that becomes live.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Now I do see Uyilawa, and I apologize if I butchered that name. You had your hand raised. Did you have a question for me?
Yes. In the course of your teaching, you did mention back channel. And I asked on the chat line, what do you mean by back channel? And I didn't get a response.
Okay, so I do not know where the term back channel came from originally, but basically it means a set of communications that are going on in the audience separate from what the instructor is talking about. Now, my personal experience with it is largely at conferences. So if a conference speaker is talking about a subject that grabs a certain subset of people's curiosity, they might start talking amongst themselves using their cell phones or instant messenger, focusing on that particular piece of information. Now, generally speaking, we don't want that type of back channel in our classrooms because we want our students to be paying attention to us. But what we can do is build in breaks for those back channels. And there's a variety of strategies for saying things like, okay, here's a quick question related to what we just talked about. I want you to talk about it among yourselves. And then there's a number of ways to draw feedback back in front of the class by doing that.
Okay, so let me interrupt here a minute, Doug. So to answer your
Please.
question, if you turn on or look at the chat in this Zoom session, there's a bunch of things that have come up in the chat, and that's a back channel. What's happening is while Doug is presenting, I'm providing other resources or answering other questions. Now, in a class, for example, that may be using Zoom as part of the way you're reaching out to your students, you might have questions that come along in that chat or back channel that can be answered by other members of your course. For example, you could have one or two students manage that chat while you continue teaching, for example. These are just some different ways to manage it. But as Doug said too, a lot of times at conferences, there will be this idea of back channeling where again, it can be monitored by other members of the presentation team and answering other questions, or it can be a way to get questions out to the presenter or presenters when they are at the end of a presentation. So there's a variety of different ways to use this concept of a back channel. Does that help you?
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I'll just finish by adding back channels can look very different in different circumstances. So this has been a great example of if you have a TA or even some students that you trust, they can handle the back channel without interrupting the main part of your presentation. But it's also a case where they can sort of vet questions for you. So if there's a question that, if there'd been a question that Theresa thought really would have benefited the entire group, she could have interrupted me and had me address that question. So with that, if you have any questions in the meantime, again, please feel free to drop them to help@oswego.edu. That's by far the best way to get a hold of us. And one of the IDs will get back to you within 24 hours. I believe I'm actually over time now. So thank you again so much and see you tomorrow, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stop the recording and then.
Oh, yep, there it is.